Hey everybody, this is Chris with Overclockers Club. It's case time and we've got something new from Fractal Design. So this is the new Torrent from Fractal Design. It comes in several flavors and we'll talk about that later. And by flavors I mean colors and different types of glass tinting. But real quick, let's look at some of the general specifications. So we've got a couple of 3.5-inch drive trays, 4 2.5-inch drive trays, 7 slots, PCIe slots. Motherboard compatibility, this is nice. We go from a very small mini ITX all the way up to an EATX or a EEB or a CEB. Those are fairly large motherboards. Power supply capacity, or compatibility I should say, up to 230. Graphics card up to 423 with the front fan mounted. Tower coolers up to 188 millimeters. We've got water cooling compatibility, so front we can go up to 420, rear up to 140, bottom we can go 360 to 420, so it looks like you can put a radiator down here in the bottom. Fans, it comes with 2 Fractal Design dynamic X2 GP18, so those are 180 millimeter fans. I know those are huge. And 3 Fractal Design X2 GP14, those are 140 millimeter fans. So we've got quite a few fans in this case. It has a Fractal Design Nexus 9-piece Slim Fan Hub to control your fans. It's got some dust filters, front panel, bottom panel. USB 3.1, Type 2, 2 USB 3.0, of course the usual audio in and out. Power button, reset button. And it's 544 by 242 by 530 millimeters. Wow, that was exciting. Let's flip the box around to the back. They show a nice exploded view so you can see. Looks like a dust filter. Then there's the front fascia, or the front panel. We've got a couple of brackets. I believe these are to go from the included 140 millimeter fans, 180 millimeter fans to either 140s or 120s in the front if you want to go that route. And then those are the 140 millimeter fans that are included. Those are in the bottom. There's a bottom dust filter, and it looks like the top pops off for easy access. What I also notice here is the power supply is on top. That's unusual. That kind of takes me back to the old days when computer cases had the power supplies pretty much all at the top, and then a glass side panel over here. So looking at, if I can read that, open grill and 180 millimeter front fan optimized for maximum air intake. So the big thing here, it looks like, is let's get as much air into this case and as much air out as we can. So new layout with expansive base intakes and extra large bottom fan support. So again, we're talking about the ability to move a lot of air in from the bottom, blow up against your graphics card. So that is a big plus. Streamlined open interior provides plenty of breathing room for components and maximizes performance potential for both air and water cooling. So what I notice now in a lot of cases, and we'll see when we get this out, is without the big stack of hard drives up at the front, that leaves everything open, which is good for air movement. The fourth item here, newly developed 180 by 38 millimeter dynamic X2 GP18 fans, which I just reviewed a couple of those and they're over here. So these will end up getting put into the case if I can find room for them, in addition to the 2 that are included. I may only be limited to 2. I'll have to look at that in more detail. Next thing here, 5 PWM fans for balancing performance. So of course those are the 3 plus the 2 there. Seamless side panels with bolt-free top latching mechanisms. So that just means we don't have a bunch of fasteners and things sticking out. So that's nice. Top mounted aerodynamic PSU shroud with integrated ARGB effects. So it looks like the power supply that's up here, there must be, it looks like maybe right along there, there is a little strip for some LED RGB effects there. Front fan brackets allow for unblocked airflow for large, okay, so that's what these guys are here. Removable top bezel and cable guides with Velcro ties make for easy installation and cable management. So it looks like all of your cables are tucked away up here in this top section. Again, we'll look at that here real soon. USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type C with fast charging support and speeds up to 10 gigabits a second. So that's up here on the I/O panel across the top. All right, so I think we've beaten the box to death. Let's open it up. I always get a kick out of opening Fractal Design boxes the way they have their little logo printed on the entire inside of the box. That's cool. And they do a nice job here of, it's like your little hardware kit or your brackets. There's, looks like the hardware kit over here. But they've got them integrated into the packaging, the foam. That's cool. All right. Okay, pro tip, have somebody help you get it out of the box. Don't do like I did and almost kill yourself trying to get it out of there. Ask for some help. Okay, all right, let's get it out of the packing here. And first impression is just, wow, look at the front of that. I mean, you could not have a more open case. It's like the intake on a jet engine. The entire thing is open. And you can shotgun air from the front all the way to the back. Of course, we got 3 140mm fans on the bottom, so the entire bottom section here is open. The 2 180mm monster fans in the front. You can kind of look through there. And there are the fans in the bottom. This is looking in through the back, and then, you know, the whole back of this thing is just completely open. You could not ventilate that anymore unless you just not even have a back panel. So we got glass on both sides, which is nice. And the top here is removable. I'll get that off here in just a little bit, but I just can't get over the front of this thing. It's just amazing. And there's the I/O panel on top. Got your headphones, microphones, USB 3.0, USB 3.0. There's a Type-C reset button and a power button. So the next thing I'll do here is peel the protective plastic off of the glass. Now some people like to leave it on there so you don't get the glass all fingered up. And normally, if I were building this for myself, that's probably what I would do, but since I need to show everything on the case, it's kind of hard to see through the plastic. So we'll just go ahead and peel all that off. And I got all the plastic off of the outside, but it looks like there's actually a layer on the inside of the glass, so I'll have to get that off too. That's pretty typical. So it's got 2 thumb screws. We're going to take the top off here, and I loosened them with a screwdriver a little bit at first because sometimes from the factory these things can be a little tight. And then this top section here should, there we go, pull back and it pops off. And there's the inside of it, so it has a honeycomb reinforcing pattern there cast into the plastic, or molded into the plastic, I should say. So there is the inside. So that's the front of the case there where the I/O panel is. There's a big open section here. You can sort of see the front 2 fans down through there. We've got a couple of access holes here. We've got a nice little Velcro cable tie. And then it sort of ramps down. This is where your power supply would go. You can see it's totally vented here. Very heavy honeycomb mesh. And there's some little rubber isolator pads here to support your power supply. Keep down any vibration. But that's where a lot of your cables will be stored. They'll be stashed away up there to sort of keep the cable management looking nice. All right, so now I'll get the side panels off. And these do just pop off, so you want to be kind of careful that the glass doesn't get away from you. But what's also neat is there's a little tapped hole right here that you can use a screw to sort of secure the sides. So if you put a screw down through there, and it doesn't come with any in there, but you can basically secure the side panel to the top chassis and keep the side from accidentally falling loose. So if you're transporting the case and you don't want the sides to accidentally pop off, I would put a fastener in there to lock the sides in, and it's got the same little provision there on both sides. All right, so now I'll get the side off, and there we go. I took both panels off, so it's completely open. But like I was saying earlier, that entire floor of the case is packed with 140mm fans, so they're bringing air up from the bottom of the case and pushing it up through the case, which will help cool your GPU, because a lot of times your GPU, which sits in this area, kind of gets starved for air from the bottom, especially when there's a power supply right below it. There's usually a big shroud right here. You don't get a lot of airflow across the intake on a lot of GPUs, but that is not the case here. So there's the front. Again, those two massive, they don't look quite so big until you look at smaller fans, but those are 180 millimeter fans. And these fans are not RGB fans, they're just regular fans. So that's why I'll be going ahead with these. I'll put these in, swap them out so we can see what the case looks like with a couple of RGB fans in the front, 180 millimeter RGB fans. And I'll have to check again. I think I can put 180 millimeter fans in the bottom, 2 of them. I'll have to see. I was thinking I could, but I'll have to look at the specifics to be sure. So over here is the back side. So now you can see we've got 3 dedicated trays for your, actually 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 dedicated trays for your 2.5-inch solid state drives. And we have 2 trays for your 3.5-inch drives back here. So you keep all of your hard drives completely out of view from the front of the case. And you know, years ago, this area here is where you always had your hard drives, a big cage stacked all the way up. Of course, that's back when a 1 terabyte hard drive was something really special. Nobody had one that large. You remember those days, right? So if you had a lot of data you needed to store, well, you had to pack this whole area full of hard drives. And you had to make sure you had enough fans or enough air movement across those hard drives, because they would generate a fair amount of heat. But that was actually years ago now with the 2.5-inch solid state drives, and now we're going more and more to these little NVMe M.2 drives that take up even less space. How long will it be before they just stop including 3.5-inch drives? Who knows? You know, I never thought floppy drives would go away, and you don't see those anymore. Or CD drives for that matter, DVD. You don't see those. Very few cases now have a provision for an optical drive. And looking a little more closely, there's the Nexus 9P fan hub. So all of your fans, your case fans, if you want to control them with this hub, you can plug them in down here. And it looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 positions there. And it looks like 3 positions here. Usually one of these is, no, it goes up to 9. So there's usually a connector here that goes back to the motherboard for control. So I'll have to look at that here. That might be one of these connectors buried here. And that's what we've got here. So there are 2 connectors coming off of that little fan controller hub, and one is a 4-pin PWM connector right there by my thumb. That goes back to the motherboard, and then there's a SATA connector here for power, SATA power right here. So that's what provides power to the hub. And then over here, this bundle, these are just your normal cables that go back to the motherboard for your different USB connections, your HD audio, and then your controls for the actual motherboard there to turn it on and off, hard drive light, reset, all that good stuff. Now, with the power supply at the top here and this area here all open, that's really pretty clever, because cable management wise, you can stash your cables up here, and then the path, since this is all open through here, you've got plenty of room to fish your cables down through this section here. So you have all this room for your thick cables that sometimes are hard to get behind the back panel. You've got grommets here, but those cables can all nest in here quietly out of view. I mean, you do have a glass panel back here, but that's so nice, because I don't know, I always seem to struggle with a big bundle of cables that are back here, and you try to get the back side panel on and it bulges out, and it's really a pain sometimes. But it looks like Fractal has really thought ahead and allowed for plenty of room. We've got these integrated cable ties and these little guides to keep all of your cables in a nice orientation. And you know, I guess I'll talk about one thing that I've noticed. Fractal Design, to me, has always been sort of a sleeper company. It's that company that may not be quite as up front with a huge selection of cases like you see some other manufacturers that just crank cases out all day long. But the fit and the finish and the engineering that goes in to the Fractal Design cases that I have looked at, and I've looked at several, I mean, I just don't see where you get much better. This is top-notch stuff. I'm always surprised, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but at the amount of thought, it looks like somebody really put some time and got feedback from end users and incorporated a lot of really good ideas into their cases. It's just like they have a real common sense approach to case design, and I don't see places where they cut corners. And like I said earlier, as far as being a sleeper company, they're sort of quietly doing their thing in the shadows, and when they release something, it's just really one big wow. And I think they're going for quality over quantity. Like I said, some case manufacturers just knock cases out left and right, and they're cheap and they're inexpensive, and there's a place for that, but there's also a place for a well-designed, well thought through case design. I know I keep hammering on that, so let's get this front panel off now. Actually, before I pull the front panel off, I went ahead and flipped the case up so we can look at the bottom. So you can see it's got these little rubber pads on the bottom, and those do a couple of things. They keep it from sliding around on the floor, and they keep it from marking up the floor, and they offer a little bit of vibration isolation. But like I said earlier, that entire floor is open. I mean, look at that. You can see the image coming through from the monitor on the other side there. It's just all open. And of course, this is the filter panel, so I'll see how to get that. I don't know if that comes out from the back or the front. Okay, so I got to show you how this comes off. This is really cool. So a lot of times when you go to pull these front panels off, it feels like they're going to twist and snap, and you pull so hard you just feel like you're going to break it. And I've actually broken the little clips that hold these front panels off a couple of times. But this comes off very, very smoothly. I didn't push very hard. I just kind of pushed my thumb, and it sort of rocks forward, and it sits at the bottom there. There's like a cradle that the front cover sort of sits down into, and then you rock it forward, and there are these little sort of semi-round tabs or pins, whatever you want to call them, that stick out, and they pop into these little receivers here at the top. So that is really nice. So again, to put it back in, you just sort of set it in the cradle at the bottom, line it up, and then rock it forward, and it just snaps right in. Very nice. And to remove it, just takes a little bit of force, and it pops right out. Very nice. So that brings me to the next point. So on the back here is the filter panel, and the way to remove it is you lift up, and let's see if I've got it right. Yeah, lift up on this, and it sort of locks into position. There are these little key slots right here, but you sort of lift it up just a little bit. It unlocks it from the 8 key slots, and then the filter panel comes out. And I know sometimes the way manufacturers make these filter panels, they snap in, so it's so violent when you release them that all the dust that's captured, it just goes everywhere. So you don't want to do it when your computer is on, because all that dust you just stirred up is going to get sucked in into your computer. So anyway, this is a pretty nice way they've got it, so it just sort of pops right back in just like that, very smoothly. And again, look at the front of this thing. I mean, it is just completely open. Okay, now looking at the front, this is pretty simple here. We've got 2 fans. What you'll also notice is there's only really one path for the air to get through here. We don't have all the rest of this open. And sometimes when you have your fans that are putting positive pressure inside the case, then that air will try to find the path of least resistance, and sometimes it's right back out through the front. So you're pushing air in the front and it's coming right back out the front. But Fractal's done a really good job of sort of containing that. So the air that's going past these fans is going one place only, and that's into the case. And that brings me to these little brackets here that are for the front. So if you wanted to change the fans out to 120 or 140 millimeters, then you would use these brackets. And they're designated black, and for the TG, tinted glass dark tint, which is what this particular case is. And again, we'll talk about the different varieties of this case here in just a little bit. All right, so we've got these nice brackets. Boy, they go to a lot of effort to wrap these all in bubble wrap so they don't bang together. And I'll pop these fans out and show you how these brackets all fit in there a little later. But we've got two of these, basically a left and a right. And this is what allows you to use different fans. And while we're talking about brackets and hardware and all that good stuff, here's the hardware kit. And it's nice on the back of the box here. It has like a little bill of material so you can see exactly what each fastener looks like. And there's a count so you know how many you're supposed to have. And it includes a little GPU support bracket. So if you've got a particularly heavy GPU and it's wanting to droop, you can use this little bracket to help support it. And back to the inside of the case. So these are all 140 millimeter fans. They are 4-pin PWM fans. And it looks like the model number right there, the Dynamic X2 GP14. Maximum RPM, we can go up to 1700, and they each draw 1/4 of an amp. Now, if you're not familiar, there are two types of plugs that can come on your fan, either a 3-pin or a 4-pin. A 3-pin just uses a voltage variation to control fan speed, and PWM is pulse width modulation. They sort of control fan speed a little differently. They supply a constant voltage is basically what happens, but you pulse it, and the number of pulses or the frequency of the pulses are what control the fan speed. It's a little better way to control a fan, a little more precise way of controlling a fan, but that's what PWM is. So if you see a 4-pin connector, you know it's PWM. And the two 180 millimeter fans here, they are also both 4-pin PWM connectors. So I think I've covered most of the details here. So what I'll do next is get my test system built up. I just got this nice GeForce RTX. It's a 3070 Ti from NVIDIA. So of course, thanks to NVIDIA. And my test system here, what we'll try to do is basically dump as much heat into the case, and we'll try to see how quickly the heat builds up and how quickly it can be evacuated, or what kind of a temperature we can hold within the case. So as far as the test system goes, we'll be using this Asus Z390 Strix motherboard. It's got a 9900K CPU. I've got a nice Fractal Design power supply. It's the brand new Ion Plus 2 Platinum 860 or 860W for 860 watts. Just reviewed it, so you can check that out, but that's the power supply we'll be using. And we'll also be using for a cooler the Fractal Design Celsius S36. So we're going to pack as much Fractal Design into this Fractal Design case as we can. And here is the user guide, and I have to say, in typical Fractal fashion, this is the most comprehensive, intuitive, easy to follow guide I think I've ever seen. They don't cut any corners, they don't cut stuff out, they don't do a lot of abbreviating. It's very clear. So I'll go through this just real briefly. So here's an exploded view, again, shows you all of the components, sort of what we saw in the box, outside of the box. And it gives you a couple of scenarios here. So if you're going to do a system with an air cooler, it sort of shows you the setup there. If you're going to do an all-in-one water cooling build, it sort of gives you a layout there, which is nice. The builder's guide, this sort of walks you through step by step how to take everything apart. And it's nice, the component that they're talking about, that they're referencing, is always in blue, so you can see each step, what's happening all the way through the build process. And I mean, they leave no details out at all. Everything's covered. There's the Nexus 9-pin fan hub, installing your drives. These are the optional steps if you want to swap out the fans in the front, and I'll do that here a little later. if you want to take the 180 millimeter fans out and put 3 140s or 3 120s in there. This walks you through the process of doing that. And I did confirm that the bottom bracket in the bottom of the case, which is right here, this bottom bracket, it's held in with these thumb screws, so all 3 of these fans lift out sort of in one piece. And I confirmed that that bracket actually can handle a 120, a 140, or a 180 millimeter fan. So I can put the 2 fans from the front down in the bottom when I put the RGB 180 millimeter fans in the front. So again, that whole bracket there is what all of the fans attach to. So got a little sidetrack there. The next page here shows how you can install a dedicated water cooling reservoir if you build a custom loop, and then it shows the template here really that has the dimensions for the little slots there that your reservoir can attach to. And I think I called this wrong earlier. So on the very top there are these 3 little holes. I think I sort of referenced those as holes for cables to go through, and I guess you can put cables through there, but the purpose there really is a fill port there for your liquid cooling. And let's see, on the back we've got cable management, which is really nice. I like that. I'll have to look at that in more detail. I kind of skipped over that earlier. RGB strips in the bottom. If you want to attach some, you can do that on the bottom of the case to sort of get a lighting effect on the ground. Secure the side panels. Okay, so I did talk about this earlier. There are some provisions to use a fastener to keep the side panels from falling out. Basically secures them to the chassis, which is important if you're going to move or transport the case. And let's see, additional info. Okay, so back here is where they show the different fan locations. A lot of people have questions, you know, can I put these fans, you know, this size here? Can I put fans there? Well, this here sort of shows you your 140, 120, 140, 180. Of course, you're limited there. You can put 2 in the bottom or 2 in the front. The next page here is probably radiators, so we can look here and see where all of the possible radiator locations and sizes are. And you're pretty much, it looks like whatever you can put in the front, you can put in the bottom. Got a 120 or a 140 in the back of the case. Let's see, so these are your large radiators up to 420 millimeters, which those are pretty large. Dust maintenance, this goes over the filter panel that we already talked about for the front, and I sort of missed the bottom there, so I'll show you that here in just a moment. These are the specifications for the fans. And finally, there's your fan hub. And okay, so I'll show you. So on the front of the case here, you reach down and there's the front filter panel, and it goes from edge to edge. So every bit of air that can come in from the bottom is completely filtered. And that's nice and smooth. Again, some of these I've noticed on some cases when you pull them out, you know, they sort of pop out and any of the dust that's trapped sort of shakes loose and goes everywhere. But this one has a nice smooth action to it. Very nice. And I'm sort of getting along with the system build, so I went ahead and put the new Fractal power supply there in the bottom. It's the Ion Plus 2 Platinum, and this is an 860 watt power supply. I already sort of scratched the top up there when I was sliding it around, so that's my fault. Then we'll get the Celsius S36. Let's see, where is it? Right over here. We'll get this in for our liquid cooling, and we'll get those fans there, the RGB fans, mounted in front. And I've got the motherboard installed. The graphics card is in there. Now it comes with a little bracket here, and I'll show that here in a little bit, for a support for the graphics card. That's what that little bracket's for. And this particular graphics card is in there very, very firmly. So I don't think I need that bracket for this particular one, but it does come with one if you need it. So cable routing so far is really nice. Your main 24-pin connector there for the ATX motherboard power. You can see it comes out the back here and goes straight up to the power supply. The second cable here, this is the graphics card. And then the third one, this is the 8-pin connector that goes up here to the CPU power on the top of the motherboard. So everything fits and reaches quite nicely so far. This main bracket here on the bottom that holds the fans, I loosened the fasteners. This one here came all the way out right there. But so this bracket actually, it sort of is pushed in, so you pull it out just a little, makes a little click, you can see it there. So you have to release it and then it pulls up and this whole thing comes out. Now this has your three 140 millimeter fans, and you couldn't really get to the fan screws very easily if this bracket didn't come out, so that makes it easier. And you can see we've got multiple slots. So this set of slots right here, this is for 120 millimeter fans. You can see we're using the middle slot section there for the 140 millimeter fans, and then this slot all the way here on the edge, that's for if I want to put 180 millimeter fans in there. And again, looking at the bottom of the case, you can see the entire bottom of the case is completely opened up there, and the filter panel is in there now. If I pull this filter panel out, you can see it's a straight shot to the ground. So we've got all kinds of opportunity for fresh air to come in through the bottom. So I'll put this back in. Now at some point here I need to get all these fans connected to the fan hub that is on the back side of the motherboard tray. Whoops, I've got that in backwards. It actually goes in like that. Make sure the fan cables are out of the way. And it sort of slides into position. You just push it forward a little bit and then it's ready for the fasteners. But I'm going to leave them out for now. And another thing I wanted to point out, you know, earlier I was looking at these little Velcro straps thinking it was for cable management behind the motherboard tray. Well, in the manual it actually shows these being usable for securing your exterior cabling. So, you know, the cables usually come out of here and they're just sort of all over the place. Looks like a rat's nest. Well, you can use these to sort of straighten that area up and keep your cables a little more organized. Of course, you can use them on the inside too. I guess they can serve two functions, but wanted to point that out. I have the 3 bottom fans. The cables for those fans are fished through the back of the case there. There's some openings. And then the 2 cables for the front fans are also fished through over here on the side. And they all come down here to the fan header here. And the fan header gets power from a separate SATA connector. So I'll run this up to a SATA connector off of the power supply. And the other thing I have to connect to the motherboard is this 4-pin PWM connector, and this goes to the CPU fan header on the motherboard. So the signal coming from the motherboard to control the CPU fan, basically now it sends that signal to all of the fans so that they will all run off of the signal coming from the motherboard. And then if I want to control any of the RGB effects, I think this goes to this little, strip right there has some LEDs in it. So to synchronize that with the motherboard or to control it, I need to daisy chain this in with any other items I have plugged in, which a little later will be these 2 fans here that are RGB, but we'll cover that here in a little bit. And then the usual connectors I need to get for USB run around to the front and connected to the motherboard. And I don't think I showed how these come off. So these are the trays for your solid state drives. They sort of hinge out right there. They got a couple little metal tabs that stick out. They're basically like hinges. And then your fastener goes right in there. I have to get the solid state drive connected to that. So that just makes it convenient. And these actually come off. There's a fastener over here. And when you loosen it, This whole thing should slide. Okay. Actually, I thought I was loosening this one, but it's the one on the right. So it sort of pushes in and then pulls out a little bit after you take the fastener. Get it loose. So anyway, you put your hard drive in here, get it secured, and then you just pop this tray back in like that, and then tighten it back down. So everything is pretty much hooked up, except you'll notice I don't have a CPU cooler in there just yet. I need to get that old thermal paste off there. But what I want to do is test the case in its factory configuration, which has the two 180s in the front and the three 140s in the bottom. And to do that, I'll use an air cooler. I'll use this Master Air MA612 Stealth ARGB that I have already reviewed. And we'll get that in there and start looking at some of the thermals. All right, so I've got the case all buttoned up. I have the overclock cranked up. I've got AIDA64 running to stress test the GPU and the CPU. And I forced the fans to the maximum RPM. You can hear them, but I would be kind of disappointed if you didn't, given the size and the way that opening is just totally unrestricted. But here's what's interesting. Just to show you, I mean, I can put my hand in front of there and say, wow, look how much air is being pulled through, but I mean, there's a piece of foam from a cooler, and I mean, you can just throw it up there and it sticks. And it's held up there. And then when we go around to the back, I mean, there's like a breeze coming out the back of this thing. Of course, you can't really see it, but I don't know how well I can show it. So here's the foam. When I move it in front, I mean, how many systems are moving enough air out? I'll even flip it around the other way here. So I'll just move it. You can see it's just sitting, gravity's holding it down. As soon as I put it in front of the air, coming out of the back of the case. So that's my real scientific way to show airflow, but I tell you, this thing is impressive. It's like I said, it's like a jet air or a jet engine air intake. All right, so I did a little bit of running there just to sort of see how it sounded. And at idle, I mean, it is just dead quiet. You can't hear anything from the front. You can't hear anything from the back. Of course, when the fans are hardly running, that's not really a surprise. So I come over here. I'll come over here and bump the fans up to the maximum. And yeah, you can absolutely hear them. Feel that air being pulled in. But like I said, you know, you buy a case like this because you want the maximum amount of airflow that you can get. And the fact that it makes a little bit of noise, it doesn't bother me at all. And I mean, there's actually a breeze. I'm standing probably 4 or 5 feet away from the case, and there's quite a bit of air coming out the back. It's like you have a box fan sitting on the table. And now I have the CPU stressed using AIDA64. And I'm using the same motherboard and the same overclock that I was using when I tested the MA612 here on my test bench out in the open. And the room temperature at that time, since it was earlier in the year, was about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm a little over 72, 72 and a half now. And I'm holding about 76 degrees, whereas before I was about 74. So I'm only about 2 degrees warmer inside this case than I was out in the open. And what I did now is I've got the GPU stressed. It was around 59. It's creeping up to 60 degrees Celsius. And I set the fans for the case to their minimum. So what I'll do is see how much heat builds up in the case when the fans are running at the lowest. And then I'll crank the fans up to their maximum, and we'll see what that does to the temperature on the GPU while it's being stressed. All right, so when the fans were at idle, my GPU got up to around 62 degrees Celsius, and then when I brought the fan speed back up, that pulled about 4 degrees. It was at 57 a little bit, but call it about 4 degrees off of the temperature when the fans were cranked up. Now, the poor CPU, the problem I'm having here is this was actually a little higher earlier, and it started to throttle and pull down from the overclock. But problem is, and it's no fault of the case, if you look in there, the exhaust for that graphics card is going right into the intake of the CPU cooler. So I would probably have to change the orientation of that CPU cooler, maybe 90 degrees, to help avoid pulling that in. But that's going to be hard to do because there's a lot of hot air coming out of there. And I have the fans on the GPU set at 50%. Close this back up. So what I'll do next is start the stress test back up again, and then I'll use my thermal camera and we'll just sort of look around the case and see what it looks like. All right, so I've got the thermal camera running here, and one of the things that I noticed right away, you can see a little bit of a thermal signature coming from the fan motors on the two front fans. But what I notice here is I'm not seeing too much of a thermal signature like I usually see on cases. There's a little bit here at the back where the power supply is. Now when we look at the back of the case, of course, you can see things are a little warm in there. Of course, this is while it's being stress tested, so there's a GPU down there at the bottom. But I usually see much more in the way of hot spots, but I think we're moving so much air through the case that we don't have a chance for that to really happen. So let me pop the side here and take a look inside. Of course, there's the graphics card, memory, VRM is under there. That's where it's real nice and warm. And you can see the three fan motors, and we should see a little bit of a thermal image or thermal signature on the two front fans. I have to open the cover because the glass reflects so much of the heat. You can see if I put my hand in front of it. And there are the two RGB fans. I did the quick swap there and replaced the factory fans. Of course, they're both 180 millimeters, these and the RGB fans, so they fit right in there. Now I need to get the front panel on, which is pretty easy to do if I can get it lined up. Yep, and there it is. So that is a very nice effect. And I killed the lights so we get a little more of the effect. Now here's the integrated LED strip that's there just at the bottom of the power supply. And there's the front. Yeah, that really looks nice. And of course, if you had three 120 millimeter or 140 millimeter fans, RGB fans in the front there, those would look equally as nice. And I'll come in close. Wow, that really looks nice. So the next thing on the list is to get the liquid cooler, the Celsius S36, into this case. So I've got the other air cooler out of there. The Cooler Master cooler is out. I got the bracket here with the three 140 millimeter fans out. So I'll have to take the fans off because I need to use this bracket. And I'll see where the sweet spot is for the radiator on the bottom. I might have to flip it around 180 with the tubes on this side. We'll just see where it looks best and fits best. These things sort of have a natural way they want to fit. And then I'll pull those 180 millimeter fans out and we'll see how well we can get the radiator to fit in the front. And the Celsius S36 is now in the bottom of the case and it fits nicely, attaches to this bracket, and then you slide the bracket in. But I will say that the tubes here are at the back of the case, toward the back of the case, and it fits with them at the front. It's just a little, the tubes seem to be a little stressed or a little stretched, and it just seems to fit better and more naturally when they're at the back, and it really doesn't matter if they're at the back or the front. And the other thing here I wanted to point out, this particular motherboard, let me get a little light down in there, the USB header, which is right right in there, a little hard to see, this connector right here. When it's plugged in, it was really hard to get it in there and make it stay straight because the cable comes out and wants to hit the back of the fans, and I was afraid I would crack the socket. If you stress it, you don't want to damage that. So I decided not to plug it in with the radiator in the bottom. Different motherboards will have a different layout as far as where that header is, so it may not be an issue. It just depends on what motherboard you're using. And with my usual 4.9 gigahertz overclock, I have the fans cranked up on the S36. The fans for the case are cranked up. And it's about 5 to 6 degrees warmer in the room than when I tested the S36 by itself. And we're seeing roughly 5 to 6 degrees warmer on the CPU, so that makes sense since the ambient is warmer. It's showing the same temperature differential, so that's good. And another thing to consider is when you use a liquid cooler like the S36, you end up pulling these three 140 millimeter fans out of the bottom, which means I have some extra fans, and I could take one of these and put it here in the back if I want to take advantage of an open spot and maybe move a little more air, or at least help pull it through the case. So I got some good results with the radiator in the bottom. And another thing, I was talking earlier about that USB cable. Well, I checked, and online on Amazon at least, they make a 90-degree USB 3 male to female 90-degree adapter. Kind of search on those terms. They're like $6, maybe 10. And that might be something, depending upon your layout on your motherboard, that you can use if you're in a pinch. Okay, so what I'll do now is get the S36 in the front, which means I'll have to take these fans out, and that means I have to use these special brackets. There are 2 of them here, and I'll get those installed, and we'll see what it looks like with the radiator in the front. And I'll probably take these 2 fans and put them in the bottom. All right, so the first thing I have to do here is pop the front off, and it looks like, yeah, everything is screwed on. So I need to take the fans out first, and then I can attach the proper brackets. The 180 millimeter RGB fans are just sitting there for now. So what I need to do is take this centerpiece out and the centerpiece here at the bottom out, and there are 2 screws on each side that hold these in. I took one of the screws out right there. But once these come out, then I can put the left and right adapter brackets here so that we can get the radiator in there. Now, I know I usually say try to avoid using these little torque drivers. I use them to take screws out, fasteners out, things like that. But putting them back in, I try to avoid this because you can really over torque them before you know it, and rip threads out of things. So I'll support this because when I take this last screw out, pretty sure this thing's going to fall out. Yeah, there it is. So that's what the top bracket looks like. And now adjust the camera down and we'll get the bottom one out. So it actually has screws a little higher, so there's 1, 2, and then 2 on this side. Here we go. And there is bottom bracket, bottom mount. So I need to get a little slack in my fans here. Actually, you know, I need a little more room to work, so let me push those back. All right, so these brackets here, there's a left and a right, and there's actually a little tab right here on either end. And those tabs go into, there's a little slot at the top. Actually, there are two slots. And there's a slot, a couple of slots at the bottom. So, since the S36 is a 120 millimeter wide radiator, I'll be using the inboard set of slots and get the screws started there. And like I said, I try not to use the torque driver there because it can get away from you, and it doesn't have any torque adjustment settings, so it's just full blast when you go to tighten something down. So this is actually pretty quick. So there's the left hand side, and then the right hand side will go in when they're like that. And I got a little ahead of myself. I had to take these back off. The reason is you really need to get this bottom mount configured. So since I'm taking the radiator off, I have to get the radiator disconnected from this bracket, and then whatever fans I'm going to put back in there, I need to get them mounted and get this bracket back in, because these little sides, they actually overlap the bracket. So once these are in, you can't get this bottom bracket out. So I got a little ahead of myself, but quick, easy fix. The two 180 millimeter RGB fans are now in the bottom. So getting this bracket to pop back in was a little tricky because these fans stick up and they're just high enough that they slide right under the bottom edge of the motherboard. So I had to unplug a couple things, and actually I'm going to pop this back out because the fan cables come out right along this rib, and they're right up against that corner in the motherboard. They're sort of mushed in there. So I think I'd feel better if I rotate this fan 90 degrees and get these cables out of that area right there. So there's the Celsius S36 mounted in the front. I've got the brackets set again for the 120 millimeter gap. And the way I have it set up now, I've got the fans attached to the back of the radiator, and the radiator is sort of sunk in here behind the bracket. Now I can put 3 more fans in here if I want to do a push and a pull configuration. You can do the same with 140 millimeter fans if you have a 140 millimeter wide radiator. And the way the front fascia fits on here, the front filter panel is really in the same plane across the face, so you can't have anything stick out. So you can't have another set of fans or radiator protrude beyond the front plane here. And I did move these 2 fans back a little bit toward the rear of the case to give a little bit of clearance along the bottom of this fan right here. And another thing is these are 38 millimeters tall, and that gives me just enough room. You remember that issue I was having with the socket for that USB 3.0 cable? Well, it's completely accessible now with these fans in here. So again, that's really a function of the motherboard and where the manufacturer decided to put that USB 3.0 socket. Or if you have a smaller motherboard, then of course it really wouldn't be an issue. All right, I'm getting similar results as far as the temperature control on the CPU that I had when I had the radiator in the bottom. Now the radiator's in the front. I was getting roughly 4 degrees over the temperatures when I first tested the S36 outside of the case, and my room temperature is about 4 degrees warmer. I was about 67 Fahrenheit, it's about 71. So that checks out. So that pretty much tells me that this case is just shotgunning the air really from the front straight through the back. And I went ahead and added one of the 3 140 millimeter fans that came out of the bottom of the case. I just put it back here as an exhaust fan. You don't need it. I just put it in there just because. But again, the whole key to this case is it's pretty much open in the front, it's open in the back, and the air pushing through when the fans are cranked up. It's really amazing. And as we observed earlier, your graphics card, where it exhausts the heat, is going to be a factor. Now, if you have a regular reference card that just pushes all of the air, the old blower style card, shows everything out the back of the case, of course your case temperatures will be optimal. But in this case, we're dumping the majority of the hot air from the graphics card when it's stressed directly into the case. But we have so much airflow coming in from the front, coming up from the bottom, with the back of the case all the way open. Heat buildup in your case is really not a factor. I always say, you know, your mileage will vary depending upon the ambient temperature in your room. You know, if you're at the top floor of a building that doesn't have very good air circulation and no air conditioning in the middle of summer, yeah, the ambient air you're pulling in the front is going to have a big effect on the temperatures inside of your case, especially if you have your system stressed. This is the little GPU support bracket. You can see it's in two pieces, so I need to run a fastener through there to secure these two. But you can see this adjusts up and down, and it's sort of at a funny angle, but the way it mounts is it goes into the back of the case, and you use these slots you can see there, come in from the back with a fastener and secure it. And then this end here, if I can get this, it has just a little rubber bumper on it, and you adjust that to the right position and it would mount under there like that and sort of hold the end of a graphics card up. This one here needs no help at all. It is quite firm, and I guess if you have a really long graphics card or one that is moving around, maybe you use that. Anyway, if you need it, you've got it. So let's just say you wanted to put your graphics card in there vertically, and a lot of cases support that feature right now, and there's usually a place right in here where there are a couple of slots and maybe a little support at the bottom so that you can take your graphics card from the horizontal position, flip it up 90 degrees, and it would go right in this area here. And depending on the case, some people comment, well, you know, if it's too close to the side glass or the side panel, are you starving the graphics card for air? The cases I've seen that have the vertical support, there's usually enough of a gap here. I haven't seen starving the graphics card really being an issue. But anyway, so this card supports it too, but you'll notice it doesn't have an opening there. Well, Fractal has a way around that. If we look over here real quick, they have this little bracket. Now this is sold separately, and this is called the Flex B-20 or Flex B20. And the way this works, if you notice, it's got all these little tabs that stick out there. Well, those go into your PCIe slots. So you take all of the blanking plates out, and this whole piece here would fit in this zone right here, and then this is your PCIe extension cable. So this end would plug into your motherboard PCIe slot, and then your graphics card would sit right on top of the socket here, and this is where the graphics card would mount. So that's how that works. And here's another nice exploded view so you can sort of see all of the components. The solid state drive trays, the regular 3.5-inch drive trays, your filter panels, there's a little GPU support bracket, your special brackets for mounting the 120 or 140 millimeter fans in the front, the bottom fans, the bottom fan bracket, top panel, and that's about it. And something I almost overlooked here. So the RGB effects that come with the case consist of this little strip right here on the side of where the power supply is located. And I like it. It's subtle. It's not overwhelming. Sometimes cases really go overboard with the RGB stuff. But this is a nice little accent. But optionally, you can install some additional RGB strips in the bottom of the case, and it's a little hard to see, but there are a couple of channels right here that run down either side of the case, and they're just deep enough for some LED strips. You can see right there, and if you notice right in here, there's a little hole, and that comes up right through here, if you can see, if I can get it to focus. There we go. And this is where you would fish your cable or your connector for this RGB strip. If you put one in there, it could fish up through there, and there's a little pocket on the other side too, just for that. And here's the graphic that sort of shows where those strips would go along the bottom of the case. And it shows a maximum length of 300 millimeters. Okay, so overall, I mean, I really like this case. You've got great cable management. All of your hard drives are located behind the motherboard tray. You've got a lot of options for front and bottom cooling, up to 420 millimeter radiators, front or bottom. These 180 millimeter fans are awesome. Now keep in mind these RGB ones don't come with this case. You just get the regular non-RGB fans. They're still awesome fans and they move a ton of air. But if you want to spice it up a little, you can add these. Of course, you can add any of these fans can be swapped out for RGB if you like those effects. The ease of access for the dust filters. Again, so easy to get to those. The front one, the bottom one here. I really like that. And to put this back on, it just pops right back on like that. I like the way this top cover, now I've already loosened the fasteners back here, but pop it back. I can get to my power supply very easily if I need to add a cable or remove a cable. Access your fill ports there for your radiator if you need to, if you do a custom loop. Which brings me to the slots back here. These are for adding a separate reservoir. I like the way the fans are mounted to their own separate little chassis here, a little bottom bracket. You can just loosen those up, pop this whole thing out, and your fans come right out. Makes it easy to clean your fans if you need to get in there, because a lot of times the blades start to get dust build up on them. The wide range of motherboard size coverage, form factor coverage. The optional bracket, again, you have to purchase it separately, but you can go with a vertical GPU if you like. Pricing right now, retail is $189.99 for this case and all of the versions that I showed you a little bit ago, the gray version and the white version. There is an RGB version available for $229, and it would just have the 140 millimeter fans in the bottom, would all be RGB, and then it would come with these 180 millimeter RGB fans in the front. I wish I had a higher award to give it. I would give this the Editor's Choice Award. If I had a super groovy platinum Editor's Choice Award, I would certainly give it that, but I don't have that, so we'll just stick with the Editor's Choice. So the new Torrent from Fractal Design is all about airflow, and it definitely delivers. So this is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.